The key didn't turn. Not halfway. Not a little resistance. It stopped dead, like it had never belonged to me. I stood there, hand still on the handle, waiting for the house to correct itself. Same front door I'd opened 1,000 times, same porch light, same crack in the step where my dad once tripped and laughed it off. Different lock. New. Silver. Untouched by weather. That was the moment I understood something important. This wasn't grief. This was a decision. 2 days earlier, I'd stood by my father's grave while dirt hit the casket in dull, final thuds. Elaine, my stepmother, had cried at exactly the right moments. Soft voice, shaking hands, the kind of performance people lean toward without realizing they're leaning. She thanked everyone, spoke about love, about family. She never said my name. People hugged her anyway. I stayed quiet. I always stayed quiet. Dad had taught me that. Keep the peace. Standing on that porch, locked out of my own childhood, home, I felt something shift. Patience isn't noble when someone else is using it as permission. I checked my phone. No message, no explanation, no, we'll talk later. Just silence. And in that silence, a question surfaced, clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. Why would my father leave me nothing? Unless he expected this moment. I didn't have proof yet, but I knew this much. Doors don't lock themselves. Elaine didn't lock me out by accident. She did it quietly, politely. The way people do things when they don't want witnesses, only results. After the funeral, she took control the same way she always had, not by raising her voice, not by arguing, by stepping into the empty space and acting like it belonged to her. At the reception, she stood near the coffee table and answered questions that weren't directed at her. How was he at the end? He was at peace. Did he say anything? He didn't want conflict. Every answer ended then, same way, final, clean, no room for follow-ups. I stayed near the wall, hands folded, saying as little as possible. That had always been my role, be present but not loud, included but not central. Dad used to call it keeping the peace. When he married Elaine, things changed slowly, not in ways you could point to, just shifts, conversations that stopped when I entered the room, decisions already made by the time I was told about them. Elaine was careful. She never said, "This isn't your house anymore." She didn't have to. She said things like, "It's just easier if I handle it," or, "Your father trusted me with this." And I let it happen. Not because I was weak, but because I thought patience was protection. I thought if I didn't challenge her, there'd always be a place for me. After the funeral, that illusion disappeared fast. The first sign was small. My mail didn't arrive. Then a neighbor asked if I'd moved out already. Then I noticed the security camera. It hadn't been there before, mounted just above the garage, angled toward the driveway, toward the front door, toward me. I didn't confront her. I told myself there would be a conversation later, that we were all grieving, that paperwork takes time. Elaine texted me once, "Let's wait for the will reading." That was it. No warmth, no explanation, just a deadline. Waiting became the rule. I wasn't allowed to take anything from the house, not my clothes, not photos, not even the watch my dad used to let me wear when I was a kid. "It's sensitive right now," she said. "Let's do this properly." Properly. That word kept coming up. Proper grief, proper timing, proper behavior. It always seemed to mean after she finished whatever she was doing. I started to understand the shape of it then. Elaine didn't want a fight. She wanted compliance. If I stayed quiet long enough, the story would settle without me in it. And I almost let that happen, because part of me still believed my father wouldn't let this go wrong, that somewhere in all this, between the silence and the paperwork, there was fairness waiting. I believed that because I wanted to. The will reading was scheduled for the following week, a small law office across town. Elaine sent the address like an itinerary. I didn't reply. I drove past the house once more before the meeting, just to see it. Her car was in the driveway, curtains closed, camera blinking. Everything about it said the same thing. You don't live here anymore. I sat in my car and made myself breathe slowly, counted it out, in through my nose, out through my mouth. I told myself one last time to stay calm, to stay quiet, because whatever the will said, I needed to hear it without giving Elaine what she wanted most, a reaction. The law office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, not the comforting kind, the kind that's been reheated too many times. Fluorescent lights hummed. Overhead, flattening everything in the room. No shadows, no warmth. Elaine was already there when I arrived. She'd chosen the seat closest to the lawyer's desk, close enough to lean in, close enough to be seen as the center of gravity. Her purse rested neatly at her feet, hands folded, expression practiced. She looked calm, too calm. I took the chair farthest from her, back straight, hands in my lap. I didn't want to give her anything to work with, no shaking, no sighs, no visible nerves. The lawyer entered a moment later, mid-50s, thin smile, neutral tone, the kind of man trained to keep emotions out of rooms where they don't belong. He greeted Elaine first, then me. We exchanged small talk, weather, traffic, nothing that mattered. When he finally sat down and opened the folder, the air in the room changed. He began reading in that measured voice lawyers use when they don't want to be remembered for what they're about to say. Assets, property, accounts, the house. Elaine nodded along as if she were listening to instructions she'd already memorized. Then my name came up. The lawyer paused, just long enough for me to notice. A monetary bequest, he continued, in the amount of $1. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. $1? Not a share, not a percentage, not even a symbolic item. $1. The number hung there naked and deliberate. I kept my face still. I focused on the edge of the table, on the faint scratch marks where someone else had once waited through a moment like this. I didn't look at Elaine. I didn't need to. She let out a small breath that sounded like a laugh she'd decided to soften at the last second. "Well," she said gently, tilting her head, "I guess your father made his intentions clear." The lawyer didn't respond. Elaine turned slightly, enough to include me in her peripheral vision. "I hope you understand," she added, voice low, almost kind. "This doesn't have to be ugly." Ugly. That word again. I stayed quiet, not because I agreed, because I understood what she was doing. Elaine wasn't just accepting the will, she was narrating it, for the lawyer, for the record, for anyone who might repeat this later. She wanted witnesses to believe this outcome was inevitable, logical, clean. She wanted them to believe I was the problem. The lawyer continued reading, technical language, formalities, the kind of words that turn lives into bullet points. When it ended, he closed the folder and asked if we had any questions. Elaine shook her head immediately. "No," she said, "everything's very clear." Her eyes flicked toward me, waiting. I asked for copies. The lawyer nodded and began gathering documents. Elaine stood, already reaching for her purse. "I'll wait outside," she said. "Take your time." She smiled again. Too early. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed was different. He handed me the copies. I scanned them slowly. Everything looked correct, properly executed, witnessed, filed, perfect. Too perfect. "Your father," the lawyer said carefully, "was very particular." I looked up. He didn't meet my eyes. "I mean," he continued, adjusting his glasses, "he was thorough. He didn't like loose ends." Something in his tone made me pause. I thanked him and stood. As I reached the door, he added, almost to himself, "He asked me to hold something." I stopped. "Hold?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction, just long enough. It's nothing I can discuss right now, he said. I'm sorry. I nodded. Outside, Elaine was leaning against the wall, scrolling on her phone like she hadn't just dismantled my place in the family. See, she said lightly, that wasn't so bad. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. This is easier if you accept it, she said. Your father didn't want conflict. You don't want to drag this out. There it was. Peace. She patted my arm once, brief, public enough to look supportive, private enough to feel like a warning. Then she walked away. I sat in my car for a long time after that, not crying, not shaking, just replaying that one sentence. He asked me to hold something. People don't ask lawyers to hold things unless timing matters, unless the audience matters, unless the truth isn't meant for the first reading. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing. Elaine wasn't as finished as she thought. By the time I got home, Elaine's version of the story had already arrived ahead of me. It didn't come as a message. It came as silence. Texts I sent didn't get read. Calls went to voicemail. A cousin who used to check in every Sunday suddenly needed a few days. When people did respond, their words felt rehearsed. I'm sure your dad had his reasons. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Money brings out the worst in people. I noticed the pattern right away. No one asked what I'd heard. They told me what they'd already decided. Elaine hadn't argued her case. She'd framed mine. 2 days after the will reading, she emailed me a packet of documents. Not a conversation, not a check-in. Paperwork. The subject line read, Finalization. Inside were forms I didn't recognize. Acknowledgments, releases, statements confirming I'd received my bequest. The language was dense but intentional. Every page ended the same way. Signature required. I read it slowly. Twice. There was no deadline listed, but the pressure was obvious. Sign now, move on, accept the story as written. I didn't reply. An hour later, my phone rang. Elaine's voice was calm, pleasant, public-facing. I just wanted to make sure you saw the documents, she said. The lawyer said this would be the cleanest way to close everything. Close everything. I asked her why it needed to be closed so quickly. She paused, just a beat too long. Because dragging this out wouldn't honor your father, she said, and I know you care about that. She always said my father's name when she wanted leverage. I told her I needed time. Of course, she replied. Take your time. Just don't wait too long. After we hung up, I noticed something else. My mail still wasn't coming to the house. I drove by that afternoon. The mailbox was full. I recognized envelopes with my name on them, bank notices, a utility statement I'd forgotten to update. They were still there. Elaine hadn't forwarded my mail. She'd intercepted it. That night, I checked my online accounts and found the address changed, not by me. Small things, administrative things, the kind of changes that don't look aggressive on paper, but quietly cut you out of your own life. The next morning, a neighbor I'd known for years waved me down. I heard you moved, she said casually. I was going to bring over a casserole, but Elaine said you'd already left. Already left? I smiled and said something non-committal, then drove away before my face gave me away. Elaine wasn't pushing me out with force. She was letting the world believe I'd gone on my own. The pressure ramped up after that. Elaine called again, this time less patient. These delays are unnecessary, she said. The lawyer needs your response. I asked if he'd said that. She exhaled, sharp, controlled. I'm trying to protect you, she said. People are starting to ask questions. Questions? I finally understood what she meant. If I didn't sign, I wasn't just refusing paperwork. I was refusing the narrative she'd already sold. I told her I'd contact the lawyer directly. Her voice changed then, just slightly. "I wouldn't do that," she said. "It'll only complicate things." After we hung up, I sat with that sentence for a long time. She wasn't afraid of complications. She was afraid of timing. I called the law office that afternoon. The receptionist put me on hold longer than usual. When the lawyer finally came on, his voice was quieter than before. "I can't discuss specifics," he said, "but your father was very intentional." That word again, intentional. I asked him directly if there was something being withheld. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he said, "Your father asked me to hold something until certain conditions were met." "Which conditions?" I asked. He paused. "I can't say," he replied, "but I can tell you this. Nothing moves forward without a formal request." Formal. Paper again. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I felt gravity. Elaine hadn't won yet, but she'd made sure I felt alone enough to believe she had. That evening, I received another message, this one, from an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. "Elaine's just trying to settle things. Don't turn this into something it isn't." I stared at the screen, realizing how efficiently Elaine had done this. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't threatened, she hadn't needed to. She'd simply told everyone the same story first. And now, if I pushed back, I'd look like the disruption. That was the design. The next packet of documents arrived the following day. This one included language I recognized, an acknowledgement that the will had been fully disclosed. That phrase stopped me cold. Fully disclosed. Elaine was trying to close the door before whatever the lawyer was holding could surface. I didn't sign. Instead, I started writing things down. Dates, calls, exact phrases Elaine used, who contacted me and when. Not to build a case, just to stay sane. Gaslighting only works if you don't keep receipts. Elaine noticed my silence and escalated. She showed up, where I worked, not to cause a scene, just to be seen. "I'm worried about you," she said, loud enough for coworkers to hear. "You've been so distant." I smiled and thanked her for stopping by. She squeezed my arm. Too tight, too familiar. Later that night, she sent one last message. "If you keep resisting, this will get ugly." No explanation, no follow-up, just the threat. That was the moment I stopped waiting for fairness. I stopped trying to keep the peace, because peace only exists when both sides want it. Elaine wanted silence. I wanted the truth. And somewhere between the paperwork and the pressure, I realized something else. Whatever my father had asked that lawyer to hold, it wasn't meant to protect Elaine. It was meant to protect me. That night, I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and seriously considered walking away. Not dramatically, not with tears, just quietly deciding to be done. The store lights buzzed overhead. People pushed carts past my windshield, arguing about dinner, laughing, living normal lives. I watched them like they belonged to another world, one where inheritance wasn't a weapon and silence didn't cost you everything. I thought about how tired I was. Tired of explaining myself to people who'd already chosen Elaine's version. Tired of defending my right to ask questions. Tired of feeling like every calm sentence I spoke was being measured for attitude. Elaine had been careful. She never said, "You don't deserve this." She just made sure everyone else did. If I walked away, it would be easy. No more emails, no more paperwork, no more being whispered about at family dinners I wasn't invited to anyway. I could start over somewhere else. Let the house go. Let the money go. Let the story go. And for a moment, that felt like relief. Then I pictured my father. Not the version Elaine talked about, the real one. The man who triple-checked receipts, who labeled folders by year, who hated loose ends and unfinished sentences. The man who once told me, "If something feels rushed, it's because someone's afraid of timing." Elaine was afraid. That realization settled in slowly. She wasn't acting like someone who'd won. She was acting like someone trying to close a door before it reopened. Every threat, every just sign, every warning about things getting ugly. It wasn't power, it was panic. I checked my phone. Another message from Elaine sat unread. I didn't open it. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself, or justify my hesitation, or soften my tone so I wouldn't look difficult. I stopped asking. That was the shift. No more, "Can we talk?" No more, "I just want to understand." No more emotional bargaining disguised as peacekeeping. I drove home, not to the house, but to my apartment, sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop. I wrote one email, short, formal, calm. I addressed it to the lawyer. I requested full disclosure of any materials my father had instructed to be held pursuant to the estate process. No accusations, no explanations, no emotion, just paper. I read it twice before sending, not to soften it, but to make sure it didn't sound like fear. When I hit send, I expected relief. Instead, I felt exposed. Because once you stop asking, there's no going back to pretending. Elaine noticed immediately. She called that afternoon, left a voicemail. Her voice was tighter than usual. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said, "but this is unnecessary." Unnecessary. I let it play all the way through before deleting it. An hour later, a second voicemail. "You're making things worse for yourself," she said. "People are already talking." Good. Let them. That evening, I received a reply from the lawyer. One sentence stood out. "I have received your request and will schedule a meeting accordingly." Accordingly. Not, "We'll see." Not, "This isn't advisable." Accordingly. Elaine didn't call again that night. The silence returned, but it felt different now, less heavy, less accusing. Because silence only hurts when you're waiting for permission to speak. I wasn't waiting anymore. I didn't know what my father had left behind. I didn't know how much power Elaine really had. But I knew this. If there was something being held, it existed for a reason. And for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was trying to keep the truth intact. The meeting was scheduled for a Friday morning. Elaine insisted on being there. She didn't ask. She told the lawyer she'd attend, then informed me like it was a courtesy. That alone told me everything I needed to know. People who aren't worried don't force their way into rooms. When I arrived at the law office, the energy was different from the first time. Same furniture, same lights, but no small talk. No coffee offered. Elaine sat straighter than before. Too straight. Her hands were folded, but her fingers kept tightening and releasing, like she was rehearsing restraint. The lawyer didn't greet her first this time. He nodded to both of us, then closed the door. "I received a formal request," he said, looking directly at me, "so we'll proceed accordingly." Elaine smiled, thin and controlled. "I'm sure this won't take long," she said. "Everything's already been disclosed." The lawyer didn't respond. He stood, walked to a cabinet along the back wall, and unlocked it. I heard Elaine inhale. Not sharply, not loudly, but enough. From the cabinet, he removed a thick, cream-colored envelope, larger than a standard letter, heavy enough to sag slightly in the middle. He set it on the table between us. It had my father's handwriting on the front, my name, the date, and one word underneath. Private. Elaine's smile didn't disappear. It froze. "What is that?" she asked too quickly. The lawyer adjusted the envelope so it sat squarely in front of me. "This," he said, "was delivered by your husband 3 weeks before his passing." Elaine let out a small laugh. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "He would have told me." "He specifically instructed that it not be shared," the lawyer replied. "Not until a request was made." Elaine turned to me then. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. "We could have handled this as a family." Family. I looked at the envelope, at my father's handwriting, familiar, steady. The lawyer didn't open it. Not yet. "There are procedural steps," he continued, "before anything inside is discussed." Elaine leaned forward. "This is highly irregular," she said. "I don't consent to—" "This isn't about consent," the lawyer interrupted, calm but firm. "It's about instructions." Silence settled over the room. Elaine sat back, crossed her arms, uncrossed them. For the first time since the funeral, she didn't look in control. She looked like someone realizing they might have misjudged timing. The lawyer gathered his papers. "We'll reconvene once the final conditions are met," he said. "Until then, nothing changes." Nothing changes. Elaine stood abruptly. "This is unnecessary," she said, "and disruptive." But her voice lacked conviction. As we left, she walked a half step ahead of me, not touching, not speaking. In the hallway, she stopped and turned. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You don't know what you're opening." She was right about one thing. I didn't know yet, but I knew she didn't want me to find out, and that was enough. The lawyer called the following week and said the envelope was ready. Not available. Ready. That word carried weight. When I arrived, Elaine was already there again, standing this time, pacing near the window like movement might give her leverage. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The envelope sat on the table, exactly where it had been before, unmoved. The lawyer waited until we were both seated. "Before we proceed," he said, "I need to confirm. Do you wish me to open it now?" Elaine leaned forward. "This is unnecessary," she said quickly. "Everything relevant has already been—" "Yes," I said. "Open it." The room went still. The lawyer broke the seal carefully, as if the sound itself mattered. Paper slid free, then another page, and another. He read silently for a moment. Elaine watched his face. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't find it. "This letter," he said finally, "was written by your father and delivered with explicit instructions." Elaine shook her head. "He would have told me." "He specifically wrote that he didn't," the lawyer replied. I kept my eyes on the table. According to the letter, the will Elaine had celebrated wasn't the final word. It was a test, a measure of behavior, a way to see who would rush to control things and who would wait. The true instructions were clear. Control of the estate transferred to me, not after a fight, not after a delay, immediately. Elaine stood up. "That's not possible," she said. "I've already—" The lawyer raised his hand. "Access is frozen," he said calmly. "Effective now." The room shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Elaine looked at me then, really looked, like she was trying to find the version of me she'd been managing all along. "This is a mistake," she said. "You're doing this to hurt me." I didn't respond. The lawyer continued. "Vacate timelines, document reviews, next steps, all procedural, all final." Elaine's voice grew sharp. "This is unfair," she said. "After everything I've done." The lawyer met her eyes. "This isn't about fairness," he said. "It's about instructions." She had nothing to say after that. As we stood to leave, Elaine gathered her things slowly, like time might bend if she moved carefully enough. It didn't. I walked out first. For the first time since the funeral, the silence behind me wasn't heavy. It was settled. That evening I went back to the house, not to argue, not to reclaim anything out loud, just to see if the door would open. The key turned smoothly this time. No resistance, no pause. The lock clicked like it always had, like it remembered me. Inside, everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't accuse you, the kind that lets you breathe. I stood in the entryway for a moment, listening. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboard my dad used to warn me about. Nothing had changed, except who had control. Elaine didn't lose because I yelled. Elaine didn't lose because I fought harder. She lost because she rushed. My father knew something important, something I'd forgotten. Justice doesn't need noise. It needs timing. And patience isn't weakness when it's part of a plan. Dad planned for this.